Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Kenyan lawmakers try to sidestep court orders delaying plans for a police deployment to Haiti. But Parliament approves the bill even just a few hours before the High Court says it will not rule on the constitutionality of the deployment until January. Also, more than 100 people, including 16 children, have died and over 700,000 forced from their homes because of flash flooding in the Horn of Africa. Somalia suffered dozens of deaths after a month of unrelenting downpours. We take a closer look. Also, Africa Tech Festival, the continent's biggest technology trade show, wraps up. It attracted over 13,000 people to Cape Town in South Africa looking to do business. Our tech editor gets the lowdown on what are the prospects of the sectors of connectivity on the continent. But first, Thursday saw Nairobi's bid to send troops to Haiti both overcome a hurdle and encountering a new one. Parliament approved the government's request to send 1,000 police officers to help the Caribbean nation battle gang violence. However, just hours later, the High Court effectively extended orders first delivered in October to block that deployment by saying that it will not be ruling on whether it could go forward until January. Now, earlier this year, Nairobi agreed to lead the multinational force to Haiti, backed by the UN Security Council, but opposition MPs have been fiercely opposed to the bid. Earlier, I spoke to Dr. Frederick Adjwang, and I asked him about what this back and forth between the government and the judiciary meant for the deployment in the long term.
So I would say that tentatively for now, we can assume that the deployment will go ahead, by the crucial High Court ruling in January 2026. So, because we know the Kenyan legislators have officially sanctioned the deployment of their 1,000 Kenyan police officers to Haiti today. So we are halfway towards the deployment. So we have to wait until the High Court will actually make a decision on this in January. The Kenyan opposition, as you clearly said, has contested the deployment, asserting that the Kenyan constitution specifically permits the deployment of the Kenyan armed forces, but not the police. But despite the opposition making a case against the deployment, the government majority secured the passage of the motion. So the constitutional legality of the deployment of the police officer is also to be determined by the High Court. So that's why the problem is, does the Kenyan constitution allow the deployment of Kenyan police officers outside the Kenyan judicial boundaries or not? So we know that the High Court is supposed to make a decision on this issue in January. So we have to wait until the court make the decision before the deployment can go ahead. But again, very much familiar with the Kenyan legal system, it's pretty much possible if the High Court allows and sanctions the deployment, then the civil society organization might again go to the Court of Appeal, to stop the deployment. And so we can have this case going all the way to the Supreme Court, and that might take a bit of time.
So it could be quite a protracted battle to get them to Haiti, to get the police to Haiti, should the government be determined to pursue it. But in general, though, why has there been quite so much back and forth over this? Why has there been so much criticism of plans to send to send Kenya's police officers to help another country?
I think precisely because there's no public buy-in into the whole decision to take Kenyan policemen to Haiti, really. Kenyans cannot really understand why the president wants to send 1,000 police officers to Haiti, a country that really has no geopolitical relevance to Kenya. And essentially, Kenya also has its own internal security issues. In the coast region, in the northern part of Kenya, we have the Al-Shabaab problem. So that's why the question is arising that why should we essentially reduce the capacity of the Kenyan police forces to sort of ensure security in the state and deploy those police officers in Haiti, a country that has no complete economic or geopolitical relevance to Kenya. And so that's why the problem is coming in. There is no public buy-in into this process of deploying the police officers to Haiti. I think the president has not really made a robust case to the Kenyan population on why we need to deploy the police officers to Haiti in the first place.
Now, the World Food Programme's warned that Somalia is facing crisis-level hunger this year. The country is still grappling with the aftermath of the worst floods it's seen in a century. At least 32 people have been killed since the extreme weather started in early October, with around 500,000 people being forced from their homes.
The whole of Fluk district in Jubaland state completely submerged. After weeks of heavy rain, the Juba River burst its banks, trapping over 400 villages. Some of them had to wait hours for help in the trees.
We climbed trees. The whole night until morning, we were beating jerry cans to call for help. We put babies and the elderly in beds and on trees and slopes.
We have no place to go back to. We're now covered in plastic. Above us is rain and under us is water. There's water everywhere. We have no toilet. We can't move.
Same scene of devastation, 70 kilometers away. Some children making the most of the situation, while adults worry about the future.
The floods had a serious impact on business because there are no goods coming to town. We can't bring anything by plane. And there's a serious shortage of goods, fuel, food, and all other things in the city. Really, we will be feeling the impact.
Around 1.6 million people in Somalia could be affected by the heavy seasonal downpours, which have been worsened by the combined impact of two climate phenomena, El Nino and the Indian Ocean dipole, according to the UN. They have described the flood as once-in-a-century event.
And vote counting started in Madagascar's presidential election. Thursday's vote was boycotted by most opposition candidates, and so turnout was low. The Electoral Commission estimates the figure to be around 39%. Critics of President Andry Rajoelina accuse him of having launched an institutional coup in a bid to manipulate the vote in the run-up to the process. He has denied this. South Africa's ruling ANC party says it will support a parliamentary motion calling for the closure of the Israeli embassy in their country. The motion was initially tabled by the opposition Economic Freedom Fighters. President Cyril Ramaphosa's government's been vocal in its criticism of Israel's deadly siege of Gaza in the wake of the attack by Hamas extremists, which killed 1,400 Israelis on October 7th. South Africa withdrew its diplomats from Israel earlier this month. And a non-governmental delegation from Ukraine was in South Africa this week in a bid for government support in their war against Russia, particularly with regard to accusations that the Kremlin's been illegally deporting Ukrainian children. Eunice Masson has more.
A Ukrainian delegation made up of civil society leaders have been in South Africa since Monday. They've been meeting with civil organizations and the government to gain support in the conflict with Russia. Now, Ukraine believes that South Africa can act as a third party, not necessarily negotiating peace, but to act as a monitor and to guarantee the safe return of children who have been unlawfully deported to Russia. This morning, I've spoken to one of the members of the delegation. She's a legal expert in Ukraine, Katerina Rashevska.
For me, it was really surprising that we obtained such a warm, such a warm reaction by ANC. So for us, it was really inspiring.
The delegation will be in South Africa until Saturday, from where they will travel to New York, and they are expected to address the UN on similar issues, including justice for Ukrainian children.
An Africa Tech Festival, the continent's biggest technology trade show, wrapped up on Thursday. 13,000 participants in Cape Town in South Africa looking to do business with the African tech sector. It's set for another year of growth despite a downturn in the rest of the world. Some of the biggest opportunities are in connectivity. That was explored by our tech editor, Peter O'Brien, as he spoke to the Director General of the South African Communications and Technology Department about her hopes for the growth of the sector on the continent.
And I appreciate the fact that you have both big enterprises as well as your small, medium enterprises and startups participating at this Africa Tech.
When the whole world is talking about artificial intelligence, and that's what's buoying up tech investment elsewhere, really looking around this conference, people are mostly interested in connectivity. So do you think that Africa and South Africa specifically can really compete when it comes to AI globally?
It is correct that the focus would still be in terms of digital infrastructure rollout. The continent is only sitting at about 36 to 40% connectivity in terms of individual household mobile, meaningful connectivity. So we have to start there. And if you're going to roll out anything, even such as AI, you will have to make sure that you've got your digital infrastructure in place first.
And just finally, back to the conference. Obviously, we noticed that Huawei is one of the main sponsors and is a big presence still in Africa, while where we're from in Europe, it's been kicked out completely over cyber espionage fears. Is that now a question that's been put to bed for the South African government? You kind of decided, look, we've not seen any evidence, we're going to continue working with Huawei?
Look, our policy as government has always been net neutral. So it's irrespective. We've always looked in terms of the best solutions that will respond to our country. So if the Huawei products are able to meet that, I don't think there is a problem. But we've also taken our own initiative. We've got other structures within our country. We've got a number of regulators, both within the ICT sector as well as the South African Bureau of Standards. So they actually do the type approval to make sure that the equipment, they sign it off from a security perspective and also meets the minimum requirements for it to be utilized and to operate in South Africa. But equally, we've worked with other international structures under the ITU, as well as even within Europe. And up until now, there hasn't been a report that has given indication that the Huawei systems compromise the security of the devices or the equipment that they deploy. So until such time that we are able to find facts, or evidence of such, I don't think there is. But I also want to emphasize that if you look there, you'll see, we've had a very good, strong participation from Cisco, from Ericsson, from Alcatel, and many others. So I don't think it's necessarily that there's one singular dependency.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Until then, take care.
Hello, I'm Annette Young, the host of the 51%, and in this week's special edition, we're coming to you from the South Korean capital of Seoul. This Asian economic powerhouse may be the world's 13th largest economy, but paradoxically, when it comes to women's rights, it lags way behind other nations, according to the World Economic Forum. And under the current ultra-conservative government, feminism has not only become a dirty word, but a dangerous one too.
The 51%, presented by Annette Young on France 24 and France24.com.